Imagine growing up in a family where money was always tight, where every financial decision was scrutinized, where your parents promised they were saving for your future. Now imagine reaching that future with college acceptance letters in hand, only to discover they had been lying all along. There was no college fund. There never had been. That was my reality. And when they refused to help me, I made a promise to myself that would change everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you are tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you are subscribed, because tomorrow I have saved something extra special for you. My name is Eliza Chen. I am 26 years old, and this is the story of how I went from being completely abandoned financially by my parents to purchasing the very house they raised me in right out from under them. If you have ever felt betrayed by the people who were supposed to have your back, or struggled to make your own way when the safety net you counted on suddenly disappeared, then you know exactly how I felt. This is not just about revenge, though. It is about determination, resilience, and proving to yourself that you are capable of so much more than anyone ever believed. Make sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, because you will not want to miss a single moment of this journey from betrayal to triumph. Trust me, the ending is worth it. Growing up in Meadowbrook, a small suburb outside Portland, I always thought we were just an average middle-class family. My parents, Richard and Linda Chen, worked steady jobs. Dad as an insurance adjuster and Mom as a school administrator. We were not rich by any means, but we were not struggling either. At least, that is what I believed. From my earliest memories, my parents emphasized the importance of education. Education is the one thing no one can take away from you, my dad would say, usually while helping me with math homework at the kitchen table. We are saving for your college, so you focus on getting those grades up. That promise became the foundation of my childhood. While other families took lavish vacations or bought new cars, we lived frugally. When I would ask for expensive things other kids had, the answer was always the same. We are putting that money toward your college fund instead. I never questioned it. Why would I? They were sacrificing for my future. Every birthday, every Christmas, relatives would slip checks into cards with notes like "for your college fund." Those checks would disappear into my parents' hands, never to be seen again. But I trusted them completely. They were building my future, brick by brick. High school was when I really started to excel. I was class president, maintained a 4.2 GPA, and participated in every extracurricular that might boost my college applications. I stayed up until 2 a.m. studying, declined parties to finish projects, and pushed myself beyond exhaustion because I believed it would all pay off. My parents beamed with pride every academic achievement, every award, every recognition. "Keep it up," Mom would say. "With your grades and that college fund, you will be able to go anywhere you want." During my junior year, I began researching universities more seriously. I had my heart set on Northwestern University. Their journalism program was among the best in the country, and I dreamed of becoming an investigative reporter. The tuition was steep, around $56,000 per year, but I remained optimistic. After all, my parents had been saving for 18 years. "How much do we have in my college fund now?" I asked one evening while we were eating dinner. My father looked up from his plate, exchanged a quick glance with my mother, and cleared his throat. "Enough for you to focus on your studies, not finances," he replied vaguely. "Do not worry about the numbers." Looking back, I should have pressed harder, should have demanded specifics, but I trusted them. Why would not I? They were my parents. Senior year flew by in a blur of college applications, scholarship essays, and final exams. When the acceptance letters started rolling in, I was ecstatic. I had been accepted to 5 schools, including Northwestern. It was a dream come true. I remember that day so clearly. I ran into the house, waving the Northwestern acceptance letter. I got in. My parents congratulated me, but something felt off. There was a tension in their smiles, a hesitation in their hugs. That night, I sat them down at the kitchen table. The same table where my dad had helped me with homework all those years, where he had promised my future was secure. I need to make a decision soon, I said. Can we talk about the college fund now? I need to know what I am working with. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. My father fidgeted with his wedding ring, a nervous habit I had seen countless times before. My mother stared down at her hands, refusing to meet my eyes. Eliza, my father finally said, his voice unnaturally steady. There is not a college fund. The words did not register at first. I actually laughed, thinking it was some kind of joke. What do you mean? You have been saving for years. The birthday checks, the Christmas money. We had to use that money for other things, my mother interrupted. The roof needed replacing. The car broke down. Life happened. But you always said. We said what parents say, my father cut in. We meant to start saving, but there were always expenses. We thought we would have more time. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I felt like I was drowning, struggling to make sense of what I was hearing. 18 years. Of promises, of sacrifice, of planning my entire future around a lie. What about the money from relatives? The check specifically for college? My parents exchanged another glance, and my stomach twisted into knots. We needed that money for bills. My mother said softly, we always intended to pay it back, to build up your fund, but you never did. I finished for her, my voice hollow. The reality crashed down on me like a tidal wave. There was no safety net. There never had been. All those years of frugal living had not been for my future. They had been covering up financial mismanagement I knew nothing about. We can help with community college, my father offered, as if that was some kind of consolation. You can live at home, work part-time. After 2 years, maybe transfer to a state school. But I had worked too hard, sacrificed too much of my teenage years for maybe. Northwestern was not just a school. It was the culmination of everything I had been working toward. What about loans? I asked desperately. Our credit is not good enough to co-sign, my mother admitted, and another piece of the puzzle fell into place. Their financial situation was worse than they were letting on. You lied to me, I whispered, the betrayal cutting deeper than I thought possible. For my entire life, you lied to me. We wanted better for you, my father insisted. We just could not provide it. Then you should have told me. I could have worked, saved money myself, applied for more scholarships. Instead, you let me believe in something that never existed. I stormed out of the house that night, driving aimlessly around our neighborhood, tears blurring my vision. Everything I had believed about my childhood, my family, my future, it had all been built on a foundation of lies. When I returned home hours later, a decision had crystallized in my mind. I would go to Northwestern. I would find a way without them. I would not let their failures determine my future. The next morning, I began researching loans, scholarships, work-study programs, anything that could help me afford tuition. I applied for every scholarship I could find, no matter how small. I took on 2 part-time jobs during my final semester of high school, working weekends at a coffee shop and evenings at the local library. My parents watched these efforts with a mixture of guilt and resignation. They would offer weak encouragements, "That is good, honey," but never concrete help. They had already given up on my dream. Now they were just waiting for me to give up too. But I did not. I could not. When a partial academic scholarship came through, covering about 40% of my tuition, I felt a glimmer of hope. It was not enough, but it was something. The financial aid office offered loans for another portion, but there was still a significant gap. That is when my journalism teacher, Mrs. Harmon, connected me with a local newspaper editor who offered me a paid internship in Chicago for the summer before college and potentially during the school year. It was the break I needed. Income plus relevant experience. As graduation approached, the distance between my parents and me grew wider. They would attend school functions, smile for photos, play the part of proud parents. But at home, there was only strained silence. They had broken something fundamental between us, and neither of us knew how to repair it. The night before I left for Chicago, my mother came to my room as I was packing. She sat on the edge of my bed, watching me fold clothes into a suitcase. "We are proud of you," she said quietly. "I know you do not believe that right now, but we are." I did not look up from my packing. Pride does not pay tuition. "We made mistakes, Eliza. Terrible mistakes. But we never meant to hurt you." I finally met her eyes. Intent does not change impact. "You let me build my entire future around something you knew was not real. How am I supposed to trust anything you say now?" She did not have an answer for that. After a moment, she reached into her pocket and pulled out an envelope. "It is not much," she said, placing it on my bed. "Just $2,000. We took out a personal loan." As I signed my name to document after document, a strange calm settled over me. This wasn't just a house I was buying. It was a statement, a declaration of independence, a reclaiming of power. When the final paper was signed, the manager handed me the keys, the same keys my parents had held for over 20 years. "Congratulations," he said. "The house is yours." I walked out of the bank into the bright June sunshine, keys clutched in my hand, a homeowner at 22. I had done what my parents said was impossible. I had secured my own future, built my own foundation, kept a promise to myself that no one else could break. Now there was just one thing left to do. I drove to my aunt's house where my mother was staying. She answered the door with surprise. Written across her face, "Eliza, I thought you'd gone back to Chicago already." "Not yet," I said. "Can we talk?" She led me to the kitchen, offered coffee I didn't want, hovered nervously as if unsure how to act around me, her daughter, yet practically a stranger after years of distance. "I heard the auction was today," I said finally. "I'm sorry about the house." She nodded, eyes downcast. "It's just a building. We'll be okay eventually." "The thing is," I continued, my heart pounding, "there wasn't an auction." She looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" I placed the keys on the table between us. "I bought it. The house. It's mine now." The stunned silence that followed was deafening. My mother stared at the keys as if they might bite her, then looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read: shock, confusion, maybe even a hint of fear. "You bought our house?" she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," I said simply. "I did, but how?" "You're just out of college." I almost laughed at that, just out of college. As if the past 4 years had been some kind of extended vacation rather than the hardest fight of my life. "I worked," I replied, keeping my voice level. "I saved. I learned about mortgages and property values and foreclosure processes. I did what you and Dad always told me was impossible." She reached for the keys with trembling fingers, then stopped, her hand hovering in midair. "What does this mean?" "For us, I mean." That was the question, wasn't it? What did I intend to do with this house, this symbol of broken promises and new beginnings? "I haven't decided yet," I answered honestly. "But it's mine now, my decision to make." The weight of those words hung between us. For once, I held the power in our relationship. For once, they would have to wait on my choice rather than the other way around. I stood to leave, but my mother's voice stopped me. "Your father should know. He's at your uncle's place." I nodded. "I know. I'm headed there next." As I drove across town to my uncle's house, I tried to imagine what my father's reaction would be: anger, Shame? Perhaps even pride? I realized I no longer knew him well enough to predict. My uncle's house was a small ranch-style home in an older neighborhood. I pulled into the driveway behind my father's aging sedan and sat for a moment, gathering my courage. This confrontation would be harder than the one with my mother. He had been the one to make those promises about college, to assure me everything was taken care of. His betrayal had cut the deepest. Before I could knock, the door swung open. My father stood there, phone in hand. "Your mother called," he said by way of greeting. "She said you needed to talk to me." He looked older then. I remembered, more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes. The past few years had clearly taken their toll. "Can I come in?" I asked. He stepped aside, and I followed him to the small guest room where he was staying. Moving boxes were stacked against the walls, labeled in his neat handwriting: kitchen, office, clothes. The remnants of a life being packed away. "So," he said, sitting heavily on the edge of the bed, "you bought the house." "I did." "With what money?" "How is that even possible?" I explained briefly about my job offers, my savings, the mortgage process. His expression shifted from disbelief to something that might have been admiration. "I don't understand," he said when I finished. "Why would you do this? After everything, why would you want that house?" It was a fair question, one I'd asked myself repeatedly over the past weeks. Why tie myself to a place filled with memories of betrayal? Why take on a mortgage at 22 when I could be building a life in New York or Chicago? "Because you always said the house would be home," I replied, surprising myself with the honesty of the answer. That no matter what happened, I'd always have a place there. I guess I wanted to make sure that was true. He flinched as if I'd struck him. "Eliza, don't," I interrupted. "Don't say you're sorry again. Don't make excuses. It's done. The house is mine now. What are you going to do with it?" he asked, echoing my mother's question. I looked around the small, impersonal room where he was living, so different from the house he'd lost, and made a decision I hadn't even realized I was considering until that moment. "I'm going to rent it to you," I said. "Both of you, if you can stand living together until the divorce is finalized. Market rate, proper lease agreement, everything by the book." His eyes widened. "You'd do that? After everything?" "This isn't a favor," I clarified. "It's a business arrangement. You'll pay rent like any tenants. There will be terms, conditions, consequences for late payments. Everything that should have been taught to me, but wasn't." He nodded slowly, understanding spreading across his face. This wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation. It was a lesson, a reversal of roles, that would force them to face the consequences of their actions every month when the rent came due. "I can do that," he said finally. "We both can, thank you." "Don't thank me yet," I replied, standing to leave. "The lease terms are strict, and I won't make exceptions, not even for family." The word family hung in the air between us, loaded with all that had been lost, all that might never be recovered. As I walked to the door, he called after me. "Eliza, for what it's worth, I am proud of you, genuinely proud." I paused but didn't turn around. "That's worth something," I acknowledged. "Just not as much as it would have been 4 years ago." I left his borrowed room, his borrowed house, and drove back to the home that was now mine. Standing in the empty driveway, I looked up at the familiar facade, the bay window where I'd read books on rainy days, the porch where we'd taken family photos, the garden where I'd helped my mother plant tulips every spring. It struck me then that this house represented both my greatest wound and my greatest triumph. Within these walls, I'd been betrayed by the people I trusted most. But in reclaiming it, I'd proven to myself and to them that their failure didn't define me, that I could build something solid on the ruins of broken promises. "Your mother wants me to add that your room is still here if you ever want to visit. No pressure, just a standing invitation. Dad, I read the email 3 times, emotions warring within me. There was a sincerity to his words that I couldn't dismiss. An acceptance of responsibility that had been missing from all their earlier apologies. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to remember the good parts. My father helping with homework at the kitchen table. My mother teaching me to bake. Weekend trips to the coast where we'd hunt for seashells and build elaborate sandcastles. There had been love there, genuine love, before the lies and betrayal had poisoned everything. I didn't reply to the email. I wasn't ready for that. But I saved it, tucked it away in a folder labeled Portland House, along with the property reports and lease agreements. One more document in the complicated history of a place that had witnessed both my deepest wounds and my greatest triumphs. That night, as I stood at my Brooklyn apartment window, looking out at the glittering Manhattan skyline, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. 4 years ago, I had sat in my parents' kitchen, devastated by the revelation that there was no college fund, no safety net, no future as I had imagined it. Now I owned that kitchen. I owned the house around it. I owned my career, my success, my independence. I had built something my parents couldn't take away, couldn't undermine, couldn't destroy through poor planning or broken promises. I had created a foundation for myself so solid that it could support not only my weight, but theirs as well. There was a certain poetry to it all, a symmetry that felt like justice without veering into vengeance. They had failed to provide for my future. Now I was providing for theirs. They had broken their promise to always give me a home. Now I was keeping that promise for them. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something close to peace. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us. Nothing, I finally answered. I don't want anything from you. Not anymore. I hung up before they could respond, before they could offer more excuses or hollow congratulations. The conversation left me feeling hollow, the joy of my scholarship tainted by the reopened wound of their betrayal. That night, lying in my dorm room, staring at the ceiling, I made a decision. I would succeed not just in spite of my parents, but beyond anything they could imagine. I would build a life so secure, so successful, that I would never again have to depend on anyone who might let me down. It wasn't just about proving them wrong anymore. It was about proving myself right, proving that I was capable of creating the future I deserved. With or without their support, the scholarship changed everything. With my housing covered through my RA position and most of my tuition paid by the scholarship, I could finally breathe. I cut back my work hours slightly, still maintaining my position at the Tribune and some tutoring, but allowing myself occasional full nights of sleep. My academic performance, already strong, improved even further. I began publishing regular pieces in the school newspaper and occasionally in smaller Chicago publications. My network expanded as professors introduced me to contacts in the journalism world, impressed by my dedication and talent. By the beginning of junior year, I was thriving. The constant fear of financial ruin had receded, replaced by a growing confidence in my abilities and my future. I still didn't go home for holidays or breaks, choosing instead to pick up extra shifts or take on short-term internships in other cities. My parents' calls became less frequent, more strained. They'd given up trying to pretend everything was normal between us, and I'd given up pretending I wanted to rebuild what they had broken. It was during my junior year that I took a class on business and financial journalism, a subject I'd never been particularly drawn to before. The professor, a former Wall Street Journal reporter named Dr. Bennett, had a way of making financial markets and real estate investments seem like fascinating puzzles rather than dry numbers. Journalism isn't just about reporting what happened, she told us. It's about understanding the systems behind events, following the money, seeing patterns others miss. I threw myself into the class, fascinated by this new way of looking at the world. For a major project, I investigated the housing market in several mid-sized cities, including Portland, and discovered something interesting: property values in my hometown suburbs were rising significantly, while mortgage rates remained at historic lows. "This is quite good," Dr. Bennett said when she returned my project. "You have a natural aptitude for financial analysis. Have you considered specializing in this area?" I hadn't, but her words planted a seed. I began taking more business and economics courses alongside my journalism requirements, developing a specialized skill set that few of my classmates possessed. That summer before senior year, I landed a prestigious internship with a financial news service in New York. The pay was substantial more money than I'd ever earned before, and the connections I made were invaluable. My supervisor, impressed with my work, offered me a part-time remote position I could maintain during my senior year. For the first time since the college fund revelation, I had not just enough money to survive, but enough to save. I opened a savings account and watched it grow week by week. There was something deeply satisfying about seeing the balance increase, something healing about building my own safety net, dollar by dollar. When I returned to Northwestern for my final year, I felt like a different person from the desperate freshman who had arrived 3 years earlier. I was confident, focused, with clear goals and the means to achieve them. My relationship with my parents remained distant, our conversations brief and superficial when they happened at all. I still carried the hurt of their betrayal, but it no longer consumed me. I had built a life they had no part in, and that was its own form of freedom. Then, 2 months before graduation, I received an unexpected call from my mother. Her voice was tight with tension as she asked if I had a minute to talk. "Your father and I are getting divorced," she said without preamble. I thought you should hear it from me rather than through the grapevine. The news shouldn't have shocked me. Their marriage had never seemed particularly strong, but somehow it did. "I'm sorry," I said automatically, unsure what else to say. "Don't be," she replied with a bitter laugh. "It's been a long time coming, the financial stress. Well, it's been harder than either of us wanted to admit." Something in her tone made me pay closer attention. What financial stress? I thought things were tight but manageable. She sighed heavily. "Your father lost his job 3 years ago. He's been working odd jobs, but it's not enough. We've been behind on the mortgage for months, the bank. They're foreclosing on the house. The house, my childhood home. The place where I'd grown up, where I'd studied at the kitchen table. Where I'd dreamed of a future my parents had promised but never planned for." "When?" I asked, my voice steady despite the churning in my stomach. "The auction is scheduled for June, right after your graduation. We didn't want to burden you with this during your final semester. Just like before, protecting me from reality until it was too late to do anything about it." "Some things never changed. Where will you go?" I asked. "I'm moving in with my sister temporarily. Your father's brother has offered him their spare room. We'll figure something out." After we hung up, I sat motionless for a long time, processing the information. My parents were losing everything: their marriage, their home, their stability. Part of me felt they deserved it, that karma had finally caught up to them for their years of financial irresponsibility and lies. But another part remembered my father's words at the airport 3 years ago: "The house will always be home. Matter what happens, you'll always have a place with us." Another promise they couldn't keep. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the house, the creaky third step on the staircase, the bay window in the living room where I used to read for hours, the backyard maple tree I'd climbed as a child. All of it about to belong to strangers. On impulse, I opened my laptop and looked up the foreclosure listing. There it was, 1847 Oakwood Drive, scheduled for auction on June 15th. The minimum bid was listed at $275,000, significantly below market value for the area. I checked my savings account. Between my internship earnings, my part-time salary, and careful budgeting, I had accumulated just over $40,000. Not nearly enough for a down payment, let alone a purchase. But I had something else: knowledge. Thanks to Dr. Bennett's class and my subsequent studies, I understood mortgage markets, foreclosure auctions, property values. I knew that banks often preferred pre-auction offers to the uncertainty of public bidding. An idea began to form: outrageous, impossible, yet somehow perfect. The next morning, I called a mortgage broker recommended by one of my New York contacts. I explained my situation: recent college graduate with job offers but no employment history, excellent credit from paying my own way through school, substantial savings for someone my age. It's unusual, the broker admitted, but not impossible. Your credit score helps, and if you have an employment contract rather than just an offer, that strengthens your case. I had 3 job offers already, all in financial journalism, all with reputable organizations. The most promising was from the Financial News Service in New York, offering a starting salary that still seemed unreal to me after years of scraping by. I signed their contract that afternoon and sent a copy to the mortgage broker. Things moved quickly after that pre-approval for a loan. Discussions with the bank holding my parents' mortgage, paperwork flowing back and forth. I told no one what I was planning, not my roommates, not my friends, certainly not my parents. Graduation came and went in a blur of ceremonies and goodbyes. My parents attended, sitting awkwardly apart in the audience. I accepted their stilted congratulations and vague mentions of transitions and new beginnings, saying nothing about what I knew about their situation or what I was planning. The day before the scheduled auction, I drove to Portland. The pre-auction offer had been accepted: $265,000, slightly below the minimum bid, but a guaranteed sale for the bank. But paperwork was ready. All that remained was the final signing. I pulled into the driveway of the house I'd grown up in, the house my parents were about to lose, the house that was about to become mine. It looked smaller than I remembered, the paint peeling in places, the garden overgrown. But it was still home, still filled with memories both good and bad. My parents' cars were both gone. They'd already moved most of their belongings, preparing for the inevitable. I sat in my rental car for a long time, wondering if I was making a mistake, if this action was born of healing or revenge or something. In between, in the end, I decided it didn't matter. This wasn't about them anymore. It was about reclaiming something that had been taken from me, about closing a circle that had been left painfully open. The next morning, I walked into the bank where the foreclosure proceedings were being handled. The manager recognized me immediately. We'd spoken several times over the past weeks. "Miss Chen," he greeted me, extending his hand. "Everything is ready for you." $2,000, after 18 years of promises. It wouldn't even cover my textbooks for the year. "Thanks," I said flatly, taking the envelope. It was better than nothing, but it felt like too little. Too late, a token gesture to ease their guilt rather than a genuine attempt to help. The next morning, my father drove me to the airport. The car ride was mostly silent, both of us staring straight ahead as suburban houses gave way to highway and then to airport terminals. As he pulled up to the departures curb, he turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read, part regret, part resignation, part something else entirely. "The house will always be home," he said. "No matter what happens, you'll always have a place with us." At the time, I thought it was just another empty promise, another meaningless platitude. I had no idea those words would come back around in a way neither of us could have imagined. "Goodbye, Dad," I said, climbing out of the car without looking back. I walked into O'Hare International Airport alone, 18 years old, with 2 Suitcases containing everything I owned and the weight of broken promises pressing down on my shoulders. But alongside that weight was something new, determination. A fierce burning resolve to succeed not because of my parents' support, but despite its absence. Chicago in the summer was nothing like Portland. The heat was oppressive, the pace frenetic. The city itself sprawling in a way that made my hometown feel like a quaint village. I moved into a tiny studio apartment with a roommate, another incoming Northwestern freshman named Zoe, who'd placed an ad looking to split the astronomical rent. The apartment was barely 500 square feet, with peeling paint and a bathroom so small you could brush your teeth while showering. But it was mine, the first space that belonged to me, not to the parents who had lied to me for years. My internship at the Chicago Tribune started immediately. I worked as a research assistant for the investigative team, digging through public records, transcribing interviews, and occasionally contributing to smaller pieces. The pay was minimal, but the experience was invaluable, and I soaked up everything I could. "You've got good instincts," my supervisor Marcus told me after I found a discrepancy in some city contract documents that led to a bigger story. "Most interns just do what they're told. You're actually thinking." His words gave me a confidence I desperately needed. For so long, my sense of self had been tied to my parents' approval, their promises, their vision of my future. Now I was building something new, something entirely my own. When classes started in September, the reality of my financial situation hit hard. Even with my scholarship, loans, and part-time income, I was barely keeping my head above water. I ate ramen for days straight, bought used textbooks that were falling apart, and walked miles to save on bus fare. Meanwhile, my classmates seemed to exist in a different universe, ordering food delivery without checking prices, buying new laptops when theirs got slow, going out for drinks without counting every dollar. The divide was stark and painful. I called my parents exactly once that first semester, when my laptop died and I needed to replace it immediately for an assignment. I swallowed my pride and asked if they could help just a loan until my next paycheck. "We're tight right now," my father said. "The furnace went out and we had to replace it." Can you ask a friend? It was like being slapped. Another expense, another excuse. I hung up without saying goodbye and never asked them for money again. Instead, I found more work. On top of classes and my internship, I started tutoring other students in writing and journalism. I picked up weekend shifts at a cafe near campus. I sold clothes I didn't absolutely need on online marketplaces. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. One night, around 2 a.m., I was finishing a paper due the next morning when Zoe came home from a party. "You're still up?" she asked, kicking off her shoes. "Do you ever sleep?" "Sleep is for people with college funds," I replied, not looking up from my laptop. She sat down across from me at our tiny kitchen table. "You're going to burn out, Eliza. This isn't sustainable." I finally looked up, exhaustion burning behind my eyes. Neither is dropping out, neither is failing, neither is proving my parents. Right when they said I couldn't do this, Zoe studied me for a long moment. Is that what this is about, proving them wrong? I wanted to deny it, to claim some purer motivation, but the truth was undeniable. "Maybe partly," I admitted. "But it's more than that. I need to know that I can rely on myself, that their failure doesn't determine my future." "You've already proven that," she said gently. "Look at everything you're doing, but killing yourself won't prove anything to anyone." She was right, of course. I was running myself into the ground, fueled by a mixture of determination and resentment that was consuming me from the inside out. Something had to change. The next day, I went to the financial aid office and explained my situation. The counselor listened sympathetically, but didn't offer much hope. "Your financial aid package is already quite generous," she explained. Without a change in family circumstances or additional scholarships, there's not much more we can do. As I was leaving, defeated, she called after me. There is one thing. Have you considered becoming a resident assistant? It covers room and board completely. It was like a lifeline being thrown to a drowning person. I applied immediately, went through the interviews, and by the end of my freshman year, I'd secured an RA position for the following fall. It would mean more responsibilities, less privacy, but the financial relief would be enormous. That summer, I stayed in Chicago, working full-time at the Tribune and picking up freelance writing gigs whenever possible. I didn't go home to Portland. Home didn't feel like home anymore. My parents called occasionally, always with the same questions. How are classes? How's the weather? How's your roommate? Surface-level inquiries that carefully avoided the elephant in the room, the fact that they had abandoned me when I needed them most. I kept my answers equally superficial. Fine, hot, good. I never mentioned the nights I cried from exhaustion, the meals I skipped to save money, the constant grinding pressure of knowing there was no safety net if I failed. When sophomore year began, things improved slightly. As an RI, I no longer had to pay for housing or meals. My coursework was challenging but rewarding, and my position at the Tribune had evolved into a more substantial role with slightly better pay. I was surviving, maybe even thriving in some ways, but the betrayal still festered. Every time I passed, parents helping their kids move into dorms. Every time I overheard classmates talking about family vacations or care packages from home, the wound reopened. Then, midway through the fall semester, I received an unexpected email from Northwestern Scholarship Committee. One of their major donors had established a new journalism scholarship, and based on my academic performance and work at the Tribune, they wanted to nominate me. The scholarship would cover most of my remaining tuition for the next 2.5 years. I read the email 3 times, certain it was some kind of mistake or cruel joke. When I verified it was legitimate, I broke down sobbing in the middle of the library grate, heaving sobs of relief that earned me concerned looks from everyone nearby. For the first time since that night in my parents' kitchen, I felt like I could breathe. The crushing weight lifted just enough to let me see beyond the next tuition payment, the next meal, the next impossible choice. I called my parents that night, the first time I'd initiated contact in over a year. I wanted to share my news too. Show them I was making it without them. Perhaps part of me wanted them to be proud, despite everything. My mother answered, her voice brightening when she realized it was me. "Eliza, what a nice surprise." "I got a major scholarship," I said, bypassing the pleasantries. "It's going to cover most of my remaining tuition." "Oh, honey, that's wonderful. Your father will be so thrilled." "Let me get him on the other line." There was a shuffling sound, and then my father's voice joined the call. "Eliza, Mom says you have good news?" I repeated the information about the scholarship, trying to keep my voice neutral despite the pride swelling in my chest. "That's fantastic," he said, and I could hear the genuine happiness in his voice. "I always knew you could do it." The words hit me like a physical blow. I always knew you could do it. But he hadn't. Neither of them had. They'd given up on me before I'd even started. "Did you?" I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Because I remember differently. I remember being told to settle for community college, to lower my expectations, to give up on my dreams. The line went quiet for a moment. "Eliza, that's not fair," my mother finally said. "We were just being realistic about our situation." "No, you were being realistic about your failures," I corrected her. "You never even gave me the chance to try. If you'd been honest from the beginning, I could have prepared, saved, planned. Instead, you let me believe in something that never existed." "We've apologized for that," my father said, a defensive note creeping into his voice. "What more do you want from us?" What did I want? The question echoed in my mind. An apology wasn't enough words, couldn't undo years of deception. I wanted them to understand the depth of what they'd done, the magnitude of their betrayal. I wanted them to feel what I had felt, abandoned, blindsided, forced to rebuild my entire future from scratch.